Hi, good morning. Welcome everyone to another interesting discussion on COVID-19 and Pi. So this is a series that we are doing where we are talking with individuals from various industries. Pi stands for politics, industry, and economy. Today we have an economist with us. A very interesting discussion is lined up ahead of us. Welcome, Mr. Smith Gade. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure is all mine.
All right, Smith. So I'll start with a quick introduction of yours, so that our listeners get an idea of what exactly you do and what your background is. So Smith Gade is a research data and senior manager at Good Business Lab. Here he heads the research and data verticals, and is currently working on research projects related to female labor force participation, skilling, and labor productivity. Prior to this, he has worked at the esteemed Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL, and he has worked on early child development projects with the government of Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan. His research interests include child malnutrition, economics of corruption, and political economy. Smith holds an MPhil in economics from the University of Oxford. So, Smith, thank you so much for taking the time, and I really appreciate it. So, firstly, I'd like to start with, it's an amazing time to be an economist, an outlier even in the truest sense of the term. What do you say to that?
I mean, I think the branch of the science most in demand, I think, is epidemiology
Right, right.
more than economist. I feel
Of course.
so. Every other economist I know now has turned into an epidemiologist. So I don't know which is better to be. I tried my hand at helping some of my folks out with calculating R0 dynamically, but
R0. Yeah.
so I don't know where. Maybe after some time, economists will again be in vogue. But let's see.
Okay, so Smith, let me start with some discussion on the COVID-19 itself. Firstly, as an economist, how has it impacted your job or the projects that you have been working on? Is there a shift in what you're doing majorly?
So let me just briefly talk about what I do, and
Yeah.
then probably it will explain how it's impacting me in particular. So I kind of work at Good Business Lab. Good Business Lab is a kind of labor innovation research startup. So it's a where we kind of use rigorous research methodologies to do impact evaluation of program, design programs which lie at the intersection of worker well-being and business sustainability. So, for example, we would try to make a case for if, for example, a garment sector where we primarily work in India is to if you kind of do soft skill training for your workers,
Hmm.
especially female workers,
Right.
it's not only empowering for those workers,
Right.
but it also kind of gives you positive ROI, right?
Right.
And that's why you should do this, not just a philanthropy or just something as a PR, but just do it as a your core business. It will be kind of improving your bottom line. So that's the kind of philosophy we do. So we
Oh,
do kind of randomized control trial for these things, and then kind of tell whether what there are a lot of kind of in apparel supply chain or a lot of supply chains, worker condition is major issue across the globe, right? So then there are a lot of firms which source from countries like Bangladesh, India, China, Taiwan. They would want to kind of have well-being programs for workers in their supply chain. A
right.
lot of time PR, a lot of time actual good intent, right? So we try to see, and many of them, I would guess most of them don't work. But if you don't have rigorous evidence, people can spin it off saying that you take a case study, for example, case of one worker who benefited, showcase that worker and kind of make a case that your program worked, where on ground it actually might have failed, right? So we
Correct.
try to use rigorous scientific evaluation to see what is working. So in that setting, what we're doing, there are two things that have impacted. We have lot of programs that were ground, and a lot of things we need to do is to do on ground field service, right? So
Right.
that part has stopped since I think beginning of March. So we
Yeah.
think a lot of businesses or places we have operating where we are doing our surveys, experiments, version. So obviously nothing could have been done, but we like take our worker well-being very seriously with people who work with us.
Right.
So
Of
even
course.
before this started, when we had the first inclination, we had asked everyone to work from home and then kind of stop our field surveys. We paid our people who are on payroll, even they were on contract, as well as then asked them to kind of take their safety first. So
Right.
that, but now the major issue is we have tried to do some of this using phone surveys. That's where kind of things are stalled, and now the major thing is planning how things will go, but changing the
Oh,
course of the experiment design, etc.
right.
So that's one part. Second one is we have started some projects on COVID, so we work closely with workers and they're very highly impacted. To give an example, last month, like few months back, we finished a study on how to kind of improve digital remittances for migrant workers. So
Right.
lot of workers coming to garment industry come from Orissa or Jharkhand,
Okay.
and we realized that only 6 to 7% of them use kind of Google Pay or BMAP, right? But
Smith,
70 to 80
can I ask you?
percent of them actually,
Can I ask you a
yeah.
question? Where is the garment industry clustered in India? So Orissa and Jharkhand are the source for migrant workers, and where do they usually migrate to?
So the industry we work with a lot of time is kind of uh, centered in Karnataka
Yeah.
and then in Tamil Nadu. So that our
Okay.
study for this was in Bangalore.
Right.
And then so what we did was, we when we started like with a lot of theory, we thought, hey, this is clear welfare gain, right? You
Yeah.
went go to shop, go pay some rent to kind of transmit your money. You already have a smartphone, so let's just teach you to use Google Pay, and then you can essentially do like watch, have your balance on your phone, and then can remit money whenever you want. These workers remit a lot, right? So they earn around 8 to 9 thousand per month. That's the salary, minimum wage, and they remit almost half of that to their
Back
home,
home.
right? So it's
Yeah.
quite large back home, right?
Yeah.
So then, but when we did the training, we did find some positive impact. Like we were able to increase the kind of cell phone usage or digital remittance from 6 to 7 percentage point to 15 percentage point. So it's like
Oh,
doubling
huge
of
impact.
it, or tripling, yeah, right. But then still people expect it to be much more. So but then what we did was, so that's a study we did, but now what we realized, hey, let's see how this COVID is affecting these people, right? So we tracked back those samples and did a phone survey with them. So now, as I said earlier, right, around 70-80% of these women would send 50% of their remittances back home. Now, when we did this survey in April, what we found is, so these workers were paid for their salary in March, right? So their usually salary cycle is on 7th of month, they get paid.
Okay.
Even if the factory was locked down, they got their March salary on 7th of April, right? Full salary. So technically, their resources were not changing, right? So they should be, right, remittances should remain same or maybe increase given their family might suffer. What we found is, out of only 7% of the sample actually did remittance. So like fall from 70-80% to 7%.
Oh,
Now, so this is very unusual for us, right?
and
So
that is with
then we,
banks actually operating. So banks were running all this time, right?
yeah, banks were running. So then we also asked one follow-up question is, why has this dropped drastically? And a lot of people answered, oh, our expenditure have.
Wow.
And then there is a lot of things of saying that our uncertainty, we are afraid of our job loss. So that plays, I mean, so we didn't anticipate this huge drop, right? So we didn't kind of design survey to kind of measure all the intricate mechanism, which we are following up, planning a follow-up survey which will try to delve more into that. But the idea is that, wow, like this was completely shocking to us,
Yeah.
right? And then so then we realized that uh, we need to understand, like there is uncertainty that's playing up because a lot of workers were afraid of their employment, like
Yeah.
what is going to happen to my job. So maybe they're saving up for that uncertainty. So the huge, like I think with everyone's head, like the kind of safety, kind of personal safety account you keep, like as things, everyone is starting thinking more about it, right? So you kind of
Yeah.
reduce expenditure, increase saving, like typical behavior. And this shows drastically. Like, so
True.
that's some of the project. We are doing few more project of how intervention, like information can be assimilated. We are doing some building some guidelines for, I think, helping our industry partners to how to kind of transition smoothly to post COVID work, getting factory operational, all of it. So to speak about how it's impacted, we have like a lot of realignment work, and there is bunch of new works that we have started. So
Right.
you had planned to ask me about how I'm doing. I think my workload has increased tremendously in past month, because there is existing replanning work,
Yeah.
and there's like 1 week where things are like, oh, now I think there will be lower
Yes.
expenditure, like there will be lower workload, and then things like short up to the.
uh, just taking that point or strain of thought forward, there's a lot of data coming out from Western countries about the sharp rise in unemployment. India, really, we don't have too many credible. Firstly, I think almost 90% of our workforce works in the unorganized sector, and which is why I think data reliability is probably an issue here. But how severe is, according to you, the unemployment, at least at this moment?
It's pretty severe everywhere, right? So, I mean, there are things that come up, like a lot of organ people working in, I mean, focusing first on unorganized sector. The businesses are shut, and they rely a lot on this casual labor, right? So that is also not there. So I don't know. There is no clear estimate of it, but there are surveys which people have done where like 60 to 70% people have said that there's a job, there's no employment. So it's pretty severe, definitely. The quantitative estimates will remain, but like in general, for example, economists or everyone would argue like 1% change, percentage point change, less or more, and then they're freaked out, right?
Right.
Now, the thing is so abnormal, like even the margin of error of 5 percentage point here or there, people are like, maybe that's fine, doesn't matter.
Oh
It's
God.
really that level where it actually these small changes wouldn't matter, because the overall things have shifted to entirely different level.
Wow. Wow. And Smith, do you see, like now with the lockdown 4.0 and, quite a lot of things in, say, the non-red zones coming back to, little bit back to normal. Uh, Workforce participation also has increased drastically, or do you see that this migration of, migration back is
Hmm.
permanent, at least for the short term, like 6 months to a year, there will be a shortage in labor? Is that a concern?
It's a huge concern, right? Because again, I think a lot of it has to do with behavior, and I think we are planning to do this. We will know from our work, but
Yeah.
as far as we know, a lot of workers are still like, my experience with garment industry where we work is kind of, it is a formal industry, right? So these are not casual; they're permanent employees,
Yeah.
at least in the industry I work with. So then there seems to be not that huge an issue. So a lot of workers have like didn't leave, because the thing was, the lot of, there are two categories of workers. There are migrant workers and non-migrant workers.
Yes.
So non-migrant workers are there, so they could come to job.
Yeah.
And migrant workers, they didn't get an opportunity to leave. So they were
Yeah.
anyway stuck there, right? Unless and until, because these workers were paid their salary, so they didn't face that drastic choice of like losing livelihood and try to go back to their native places. So at least we don't know any cases where workers kind of take this ordeal of walking home. So day
In
workers were
your
there.
in
So
your
then,
particular sector, right? In the garment
yeah,
sector. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm talking, right. So in that sector where people had this job. Now, on other hand, like if you talk of informal sector, it's very chaotic, and it's just like, I think these are just casual observation, with I think everyone has it. Like people have gone back home, they have endured huge hardship to go home. So then there is this psychological trauma of coming back, right? So
Yeah.
that issue is there. Also, we don't know whether they have mechanism to come back at the moment, right?
Wow.
So all of it is an issue. So I think we would face, so there's this kind of balance, right? So the equilibrium of kind of canonical demand and supply, where we need workers to start things, but the economic activity has gone down. So the demand of workers might have has gone down as well, right? So
Right.
it might settle into kind of low equilibrium where the demand is low and supply is also low. But I mean, it's too early to say anything, right?
Correct.
So once things start kind of getting, we are seeing some of this where kind of hotels or restaurants don't have staff to kind of work, but they also don't have orders. So we don't know whether there's a staff shortage or not. Once things start getting back up, then you will see, like, then when the market starts getting tight, you will see how the trend of supply as well as like
Right.
price discovery happen.
Smith, interesting thing you said, when things start getting back to normal. So when will things start getting back to normal? That's a question that uh, you know. I'll request you to put one foot as an economist and one foot as an epidemiologist, or at least the background work you have done there. If you have some ideas of how you think this can pan out for India, because right now, sorry,
For
I still want to elongate the question. Right now, with the lockdown lifting, our number of cases are starting to really rise in the last 4 5 days. Today being the 23rd of May, in the last 4 5 days, you've seen sharp rise in the number of cases, COVID-19 cases in India. So, what are your thoughts on that?
so sometimes, like, so I'll like give you an analogy, right? Like how human beings in general, or we Indians in particular, whatever it's right. Just a clear example is like air pollution in Delhi, right?
Yeah,
Like it seems so distance past, but you're just around the corner.
yeah,
Time has taken different dimensions in our head, right? So
correct,
what happened is, like, it's very severe crisis, and some could argue that the cost, like human, like years of human life cost of air pollution in Delhi much might be higher than this COVID-19.
yeah,
Some could argue that, right? But the issue is, what happens in some of these cases is, behaviorally humans, or like evolution wise, we kind of get attuned to risk, or just become blunt with that.
yeah,
And then what happened with air pollution there is, people, if like first instances, people wear masks, stay indoors, don't go out. But once it's like becomes a constant part of your life, you
yeah,
just kind of start ignoring all the precautionary stuff, right?
correct,
And that is what I think is going to happen with normal people. Be like, oh, I did this for 15 days, now it's like just too much. Either for some people, genuinely because of the economic cost of not working,
yeah,
or not being able to work from home, adhere all the things. But even on the streets, going on things, people will just start becoming much more relaxed about this and not follow it. So that's what I mean, where we would go into a kind of stage where there are still kind of containment zones locked down, but people might not kind of just be accept it as a risk part of our life in
right,
some case. And that's what I call it normal in the short run, where people would go to their businesses. Whoever can would work from home, follow 60 precaution. Who can't will just accept that this is the risk I carry. And a lot of people would then just forget about it. For example, if you see, like, for probably a lot of people who live in these slums, right? Dengue is part of the life.
yeah,
What, like, dysentery is part of life because water quality, right? And they just, like, morbidity rate in children in India is high, and that's one of the major reasons for malnutrition, right? So, but people just accept this is how things are, and then just do it. And I would think that is what will take us to normal. Good
got
or
it,
bad, don't know, but that's probably where people are like, either I'm fed up with this continuous lockdown, and I just tend to start ignoring it. We have seen this happening right now as well.
yes,
Like I live in Lajpat Nagar in Delhi, and now things are opening up. People now don't seem to follow social distancing. Even if they have masks, they'll take off their mask and talk to the person in front of you, right? So
Correct.
it's like, but that's probably be the normal, I feel.
Yeah. Thank you, Smith. There is a good amount of talk about second order effects and third order effects of such a unusual pandemic happening. So can you speak to our viewers about what exactly a second or third order? A lot of people don't know what it is, because for many people it is just that 2 months of or 1.5 months of economic activity didn't take place. All right, so basically let's reduce 1.5 months from the 12 months, and let's accordingly reduce the GDP prediction. So a lot of people think very linearly. So can you bring some light to this kind of second and third order effects?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? So economy, if you think it's a machine, the fuel for that is beliefs,
Right.
right? And that's very critical aspect of this pandemic. Second is it's very interdependent, right? So the way kind of lot of recessions pan out is kind of this very typical idea of vicious cycles. So
Yeah.
what I mean is, for example, there is lack of demand for your goods, so you reduce your production. That
Yeah.
means you don't have enough industrial activity to provide salaries for workers, so workers are laid off. That kind of fuels the reduction in demand, and then kind of that will kind of sustain like itself, right? And
Right.
then you need something to kind of boost, like very typical Keynesian economics of boost aggregate demand for businesses to start producing more, and then kind of get that engine growth, right? So that's very typical basic idea. Now with this, the economy, like I think I'm a bit speculative, but this might be one of the biggest jump in kind of reduction in production in the world simultaneously. Like, I mean, we have had pandemics, everything, but this was not that centralized approach, as well
Correct.
as, so maybe one of the biggest drop in global
Production.
production
Yeah.
in like month of March, April, where people like most of the countries were shut, right? So
Yeah.
in that case, like how to restart is, it's not like a lot of businesses would go down under because liquidity constraints, right?
Yeah.
For example, a lot of businesses don't have staying capacity for 3 months, a lot of time.
Correct.
The payments, and also even if they have payments coming in, those are delayed. People are not making payments because of uncertainty, like they want to protect their own businesses. So I owe you money, I will try to delay it or not pay you, and that might force you. And it's not just me and you, right? For me, there are some other people who are not paying me money. So this
Yeah.
whole kind of lack of trust, or
Yeah.
just trying to kind of become conservative, would then force a lot of businesses into kind of going down under, so to speak, right? So that's one.
Yeah.
Then there is a demand of where is the demand going to come from, right? A lot
Right.
of people have reduced their consumption, all of it, right? So even if you're a factory manager taking decision, should you be producing cars now? Even if you assume the perfect condition where there's no pandemic, or you have all the workers you need for production, is there a demand for that, right? Are work people willing to kind of buy stuff
Correct.
like durable stuff, right? So that thing kind of is something which kind of messes up a lot of things, and that kind, getting that right, getting that engine kind of all the things going would be very critical. So again, I think people are right that if it's like 1 or 2 months stuff, then probably that's things people can weather and just go back. But you don't know whether it's 1 or 2 months and how kind of this transient thing translate into kind of long. For example, some sectors, right?
Yeah.
For example, tourism. For a lot of states or a lot of cities, tourism is a big industry.
Correct.
Now that has completely been wiped out, at least for some time, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of has a, for some economies, that might just be a huge shock, right? And that's very difficult to recover from. As and tying it to something I spoke earlier, like people, you see remittance behavior has changed.
Right.
That has a lot of impact on rural economy, but then people's buying behavior might have changed, right? Would people be buying cars as much they were buying? Would
Correct.
people be like, be go in like this, like either the income are going for those who have the same level of income, the salary income, would you be spending so much, or would you be thinking, oh, I should save more?
Correct.
And if I'm saving, where is that saving? Is if like in a model that goes into businesses, where then like usually you save in banks, the bank would lend to businesses, business use for kind of investment to grow. So that's kind of productivity gain the economy gets, right? So saving rate is good, but in this case, even if you put it in the bank,
Yeah.
would banks would be willing to lend to businesses, and would businesses would be willing to take that money up and do
Exactly.
investment or do, right? So lot of second third order things that are happening, that
Correct.
mean like this economy works in a very kind of like interdependent complicated cycles, and you need to make like everything start
Every
moving
gear
again,
rotate.
so that
Yeah, because it
yeah,
is all
right,
connected like a gear chain, right? So you have to start
yeah,
getting the largest. So one of the things that the government has recently done with its stimulus 2.0 is made liquidity abundantly available, right? And at least that is what the claim is. The banks are flush with liquidity. But like you rightly pointed out, is somebody really going to borrow at this stage? Okay, and if they're going to borrow, are they going to borrow to produce, or are they going to borrow to cover their previous interest costs? It is definitely a difficult time. One statistic that I read, Smith, was that uh, in December 2019, the top 700 companies listed in the Sensex, they were running at 70% capacity. Okay, so already we had 30% spare capacity, and now with this creating a further uncertainty in at least short term or medium term demand. I don't know what will happen to that excess capacity and how companies will be able to, manage that fixed cost, and they probably have leverage on that fixed cost. Okay, so my question here is, in this entire episode of a probable demand implosion, or a drastic reduction in demand for some time, is it a threat of are we facing a threat of deflation?
I mean, so couple of things, right? So as you rightly pointed out, right? If you go back to say Feb or March or Feb, probably all the discussion were, are we heading into recession? So we are already on downward things, right? Like everybody was talking about it. So now that, so we are already not in like our heydays of 7-8% economic growth, right? So the kind of outlooks were already bearish for a lot of businesses anyways, right? So
Correct.
in that case, how do you kind of like get this is very difficult question, right? So your typical answer is kind of Keynesian answer, if you were to give, is like government used to spend demand, right? Just government should spend so that you boost up aggregate demand, and that will start the engine rolling, right? It's easier said than done, whether because you need to kind of like, as I said, right, that's multiple steps. Even if government wants to do, would it generate enough demand, economic activity, give money in the hands of people? All of it needs to be kind of looked at, and it's very intricate, difficult to predict.
Right. Right. Fiscal policy versus monetary policy in such times. So what as an individual, what is your preference in such a time? Should the government look at putting money in the hands of people, or should the government expect people to borrow money from financial institutions?
So I think uh, it's very clear answer at this point, right? So people argue about efficacy of monetary fiscal policy a lot of time at the margin, right?
Yeah.
The things have shifted so much. I think at this moment government should do whatever it can do, right? That's very simple. You don't need either this or that. It's like
Yeah.
you need everything, right?
Correct. Correct.
So for example, there are two aspects to it, right? We have talked a lot about like boosting demand, but that is kind of medium term. At the moment, like there's huge human suffering because of this, right? People have lost their livelihood. They can't even, migrants have to go home. There are no employment efforts. Like the employment in rural area is always scarce. That's why people migrate. But now it's a collapsed, right? And there is huge lot of people going back there. So just government needs to do what it can to kind of first kind of reduce this hardship as much as possible. So I do think like government needs to, for this short term, provide people relief in terms of just direct benefit transfer to their account. So that's definitely yes. Now, kind of thinking about people borrowing, that idea is very kind of, I am not sure like practicality. So technically it seems fine because in my economist in my head says, hey, this is very simple, right? You should borrow from, if you think your future, or if you think that you have a future income flow, then you
Correct.
should probably borrow now to smooth your consumption, right? Very simple kind of thing. The issue is, a, would banks, are banks lending
Right.
first?
Right.
Are you willing to kind of take that additional thing? And for me, it might be the case that banks might lend to me. But do you think that if you are a farmer in, say, rural Bihar, do you think banks are going to entertain you for you? What about if you're a worker who doesn't have something to mortgage? What
Yeah.
about it? So, like, practical issues are right, and these the irony of the situation is, the sad irony of the situation is, the people who need the most have least access to it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I do think government should kind of, I mean, fiscal stimulus is kind of the hour of the day. Government should do as much as it can do to kind of, a, help people and boost the demand. So
So
that's, I think in my head is very clear answer.
I
I
think
haven't seen anybody arguing against it.
I completely agree with you on that. I mean, it is undoubtedly something that we can get behind, but there is a practical constraint to it. A developing nation like India cannot endlessly print money. Say some
Agree.
so somebody like the USA or a UK or a Japan, I mean, they are endlessly printing money, okay, to meet whatever shortfall. But with our currency rate risks, we really can't print money. So how is this equal, for a developed world? They kind of have a unending well of uh, currency, and we don't. How is that kind of a level playing field?
It is not. Life isn't fair, right? And that's what it's true. That's what the reality world. I mean, don't go to developed and developing world. Look at you and me and look at the migrant workers. Is that fair? It's
Not fair.
not.
Great.
It's not. And that's what it is. Kind of the kind of money printing business. I mean, dollar is a special case. So let's not think they kind of get a lot of advantage it being international currency. But for India, I do think that we can't kind of print money endlessly, but we do have a lot of fiscals. I do think that there's enough growth and fiscal space in India to get government to have fiscal things, right?
Right.
So we kind of, it would be very, very unwise and stupid to try to stick to your kind of fiscal deficit numbers at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's for
Yeah.
sure. I don't think we can go to like, hey, let's do like do 30% of GDP for borrowing, like go crazy. That's obviously not possible. But whatever government can do, it should, and it should try to go kind of push the limits of how much it can help people at the.
Right. So currently the targets are, I think, 3.5%. So maybe there's a talk that it'll be 8 to 10% is something that people are okay with. But then that there is a threat of your rating, the sovereign rating falling if you have too much. Really, the developing countries just cannot have it. You know, all sorts are pointing towards us in a way.
Agreed. But I do think like, I mean, so here is the alternative, right? Like if you have demand go like collapse in
Yeah.
this time, you are anyways going to get a rating cut because your GDP growth numbers are going to be so bad
Correct.
that you, by just virtue of your denominator going down, your growth fiscal deficit number will go up.
Absolutely. So
So
basically, what you're saying is that
again,
either you do this and definitely fail, or you try to do this and maybe have a chance at not failing. So that is the
also
options we have.
huge disclaimer: I'm not a macroeconomist. So if you had asked me this in regular time, saying that, hey Smith, government is thinking about taking its fiscal deficit to 3% to 4%,
Correct.
right? I'm like, man, I don't know about this,
Fair enough.
because it's like there are a lot of trade-off, right? Welfare trade-off. You can invest in health, which can have long-term economic benefits,
Right.
and maybe it can offset. Maybe you give more preference to kind of helping poor, so you government is trying to increase welfare scheme, and there are a lot of trade-offs there, right? And that's very difficult. I think I would have said I don't know, because you need much more time, effort, expertise in that field, which I don't have. But this case, it's very clear, right? Because the margins are very wide. So if you ask me whether government should do the 7% or 8%, I don't know answer. Frankly, I don't know anybody who would know the answer to that at this point. But
Correct.
uh,
Yeah.
but I think for me, I think it makes sense to kind of increase it drastically and then try to go to the numbers, which where government stop, where these numbers stop making sense, where kind of borrowing government kind of then start kind of crowding out the private investment, when it starts to kind of start other decisions start kind of weighing on
Yeah.
long term kind of fiscal health of government.
Yeah.
Those are difficult decisions. I think we have people who have expertise in commenting on it, so I
Fair enough.
wouldn't go there.
Fair enough. Smith, let's. I would like to talk about something that you do. You have expertise in. Uh, I would like our viewers to get an understanding of the kind of work you guys do and the research and how it translates, how it helps translate, or how it helps drive political decisions, especially the kind of surveys that you do with labor forces, with corruption, or with unemployment. Can you give us an idea of something that you must have done? Because a lot of people don't
So,
understand what a microeconomist does, you know?
so I mean, to quote my favorite like economist who's a stand-up comedian, is macroeconomists are people who are wrong about large things, and microeconomists are people who are wrong about smaller things. So, so I mean, to kind of give you a brief idea, I mean, so I would consider myself as a development economist. So what I do is kind of look at the thing, and then again, the definition doesn't matter, and it's a very kind of vague definition anyway. So what we try to do is try to look at something very kind of formally, is building human capital, and everything kind of be subsumed into that in terms of, okay, some of the questions theoretically would be, how do you build human capital? How does, for example, formative year take kind of contribute to your human capital of people, right? So for example, if you intervene in say first 3 years of life of children, how much kind of welfare you can gain for that children? How does it that build kind of human capital? And then trying to see the what are the, then that's conceptually, then what are the government policies or policies in general can help those things. For example, how can vaccination help in that regard?
Yeah.
How can providing child care for women provide in this case? How to kind of, if you do kind of visits by trainers in these children, that can impact, or kind of do an information campaign about breastfeeding, how could that impact? So these are very like very specific policy question, and try to find that impact. And then the way it works is, in isolation they might not add much. When you start aggregating this evidence, you
Yeah.
get a coherent policy. For example, okay, government is should invest and prioritize in kind of helping people, children who are in first 3 years, to vaccination, to kind of nutrition, to food, and awareness to women. And then what are the best ways to do it? And then it gets translated into policy, where the ICDS department kind of takes them into picture and then try to modify the way. I mean, it's very simply, there are a lot of hoops you have to cross,
Right.
and you many times can't cross it. A lot of political economy involved there, of how to translate evidence into action policy. So, huge debate, but that's kind of the idea.
Right. Awesome. Okay, that was
So
very
just
interesting.
one small point here is something that is kind of ideological and also against ideology, is what kind of lot of people who I work with, for example, JPAL, are trying to say we should make policies evidence based,
Hmm.
and in the sense of like instead of anecdotal evidence or kind of a bureaucrat who thinks what how it works,
Correct.
instead of using that as a parameter, let's try to add more evidence, data, research into that. Now, what can be characterized as research? What is useful research? What is it sufficient? Is it policy? That are very difficult questions to answer in the short time, and those are valid questions in my opinion. But that the idea is to kind of make policy much more evidence based.
Sure, sure. Great. I mean, thank you, Smith. That was insightful. So, on a lighter note, or actually not on a lighter note, where are the economists putting their money these days? Where are you investing your money?
uh, I don't know whether economists have any kind of comparative advantage to anyone while investing money, because to be honest, it's a very different ball game. Like
Yeah,
you have some fundamentals, but those help you in probably long term, if they at all.
yeah,
In short term, it's a very different skill set, as well as it is a lot of time and effort in kind of thinking very interesting. For me, the safest thing is to just kind of very like fundamental level. I think this is something which is going to be over in some time,
yeah.
and so the long term the growth projections are going to take some hit, but they remain decent for India. So then kind of thinking about a maybe some sectors which you didn't have exposure to, which you want to invest, or just
For
invest in
example,
some like on Nifty.
for
For
example,
example, I mean, this is very personal. Like, I didn't have any stocks which were in the like agri sector,
yeah.
and I thought it's a good opportunity because of valuation. I think the thing is like people like markets, as you know way more than I do, is don't follow the same cycle. They're based on expectations. So if you think that things are going to go bad in 1 year, people will react today and put that expectation into their valuations, right?
Correct, correct.
So then kind of thinking like using this, and most of the time people overreact. So
True.
then essentially market will go down much more than it should and go up much more than it should, right? So
Overreaction is the platform of mean reversion. If there was no overreaction, there would be no concept such as mean reversion. Yeah.
yeah, and it's hard to tell economists that there will be overreaction, right? In models, it's very difficult. You need
Correct,
behavioral models for that, right? So
correct.
in other models we deal with, there is no overreaction. Has perfect foresight and everybody is perfectly rational with no kind of limitation on calculations they can do in their head, right? So that's a very like that's very maybe 1990s way economics think,
Correct.
but like behavioral things are there and other stuff. But I think like just thinking about market fundamental, maybe kind of index investments might make sense, where you don't have to put too much thought effort
Yeah.
into kind of picking stocks, making sure the valuations are right, all of things, and then kind of very simple way of investing which doesn't tax your brain too much and is decently safe.
Correct. Correct. Good. Thank you very much, Smith. I really appreciated how you, consistently maintained an unbiased perspective, as well as weighted the pros and cons of your argument yourself. That was something which is very unique, and I really admire that. Uh, okay, so I would like to close with a positive discussion. All this discussion has been positive, but a genuinely positive thought. What have you positively taken from this episode personally? I'm sure even you were locked down for some time. How has life changed for you?
To be honest, it hasn't changed much. So I have a daughter 10 months old, and for last few months, like even before lockdown, I used to kind of work from home like 4 days a week and go to office a day.
Right.
So my life, so there was a lot of things, and then so I already my kind of work things were organized in a way that I would work from home. So I think I still get to spend more time with my daughter. Also, on a personal note, I live in very crowded Lajpat Nagar area, and the sound pollution can get on your nerves in a lot of ways. So I have been enjoying the quiet quite a bit, and I dread when the horn starts blaring out again.
Right, right. I know, I know. So I'm based in Mumbai, and we are having the most peaceful last 2 months. I can see, I think 10 kilometers away from my window, I stay on a high-rise building, and we could never see more than 3 or 4 buildings away. Now we can see like a panoramic view of the city. Yes. All right. Thanks a lot, Smith. I think uh, our viewers will probably really enjoy watching this particular discussion. I will be very glad if in the future we again can get together and have a more have more discussions on all topics under the sun. Really, really insightful. Thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Smith. Take care.
Yeah, same to you.
Thanks.